Good morning, everyone. Hello. Hi. Welcome, welcome. I'll let everyone continue to get virtually settled in. Awesome. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Chauncey Bowden. I am the program manager for membership engagement here at the Chamber. We are so thrilled to have you all virtually joining us for this important discussion on gender equity at home and in the workplace. I am pleased to introduce Tara, who will be speaking with you all from Credit Suisse.
Hi, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for attending our virtual Chamber Professional Women's Luncheon. We have an exciting program planned. Thank you for your continued support in our decision to host this event virtually. Our focus is always on the well-being of our members and community. This luncheon will provide you with resources to keep growing and expanding your professional goals and connections. And Credit Suisse is honored to be a sponsor for this event. My name is Tara Kupsalitis, and I am a director at Credit Suisse within the Product Control Department, covering capital markets, M&A, and advisory, and I've been with the firm for 13 years. Credit Suisse is a global and leading wealth manager which specializes in investment banking capabilities. We opened our Raleigh office in 2005 and have been steadily growing ever since, with roles in finance, operations, technology, risk, audit, and many more. As we grow, we do maintain our dedication and determination to diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace, with notable efforts to help build the STEM pipeline, foster the advancement of women in finance and tech, and the introduction of programs within the neurodiversity spaces and Real Returns. Our Real Returns program gives talented professionals who have taken an extended career break, who are overwhelmingly women, the opportunity to restart their careers and transition back into the workplace through a specially designed program to support them in doing so. Over the last few years, Credit Suisse Raleigh has converted many of these program participants to full-time employees. That's a real tangible impact in the lives of these women and a huge gain for Credit Suisse. We are very proud to be a sponsor for today's event. I want to recognize the sponsors who make this event possible. Because of their commitment to this series, the Raleigh Chamber can present important and relevant topics throughout the year, virtually and in person. Thank you to each of these sponsors: Green Resources, Change Agent Communications, Citrix, MERS Aesthetics, and Wells Fargo.
All right. Hello. Welcome, everybody. Good afternoon. On behalf of Green Resources and myself, we are so excited to have everyone here today. My name is Kara, and I'm a search consultant at Green Resources. We're a recruiting firm that connects great people with purposeful, impactful careers in the Triangle and around the country. Each day in my role at Green Resources, I get the opportunity to connect with impactful people. It is inspiring to have a front row seat to watch women believe in themselves, grow in confidence in the workplace, and become connected with impactful careers. Due to COVID, many of us have also gotten a front row seat to coworkers balancing parenthood and work, all from home. As we transition back to a hybrid or in-person workforce, there are many structural and organizational shifts that will need to happen to take the pressure off of working parents. No one knows more about this than our panelists. All of them have worked with determination throughout their careers to be where they are today. I know I'm not the only one looking forward to hearing their incredible stories and learning from their journeys. Let me tell you a little bit more about each one of them. Our first panelist is Margaret Chadwick. She is the Senior Vice President of Human Resources and Chief HR Officer for Cree Wolfspeed, a global semiconductor company headquartered in Research Triangle Park. Prior to moving into this role in early 2020, Margaret was the HR leader for the Global Operations Business Unit, which has 4,000 employees located all over the world. Having spent her entire career in HR, Margaret has developed a specific expertise in leading and communication. She's a graduate of Wake Forest University, but right now her heart belongs to Virginia Tech, where one of her stepdaughters, Maddie, is a sophomore. Her other stepdaughter, Alex, is a teacher in Orlando. Welcome, Margaret. Our next presenter is Dr. Jeronica Goodwin, Senior Vice President of HR and Chief People Officer at Wake Med. Dr. Goodwin is a seasoned healthcare human resources professional with more than 20 years of experience. She has experience working in both large and mid-sized hospitals and healthcare organizations. Dr. Goodwin earned a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration from St. Augustine's University, a Master of Science in Human Resources and Administration from Central Michigan University, and a Doctor of Health Administration from Central Michigan University. She is the founder of the Raleigh Triangle chapter of the National Association of African Americans in Human Resources. In her spare time, she enjoys volunteering at various organizations around the community, traveling internationally, dancing, and cycling. Welcome, Dr. Goodwin. Our final speaker is Courtney White, an award-winning leader, executive coach, and speaker. Courtney is the head of human resources for North America, Global Seeds and Traits, and Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for BASF Agricultural Solutions. He is accountable for leading the development and implementation of strategies to engage and harness the dynamic power of people. Having worked with multiple top-tier organizations for more than 15 years, Courtney's career has been focused on unleashing organizational potential, enhancing innovation, and driving performance-based cultures of growth on 6 continents. A true Tar Heel, Courtney was born and raised in Durham, North Carolina, later graduating from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. In life, he is guided by the quote, "If your presence doesn't make an impact, then your absence won't make a difference." Welcome to Courtney as well. And thank you all for allowing me the opportunity to introduce our wonderful panel of speakers today.
Awesome. And I'll also give you all a chance, Courtney, Margaret, and Dr. Goodwin, to say any additional words if you like.
Yeah, I think we each are going to say just a little bit. I just want to say I'm really excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm very much looking forward to hearing from my co-panelists, and I'm sure getting some wisdom from them and from the participants as well. Just a couple of things just to kind of frame up, at least, my perspective on this, obviously, which comes from the representative of an employer. And if we take the broad question that we're tackling together of how do we make our workplaces and our communities places where everybody can thrive, everyone can be happy and successful, whatever that means to them. I approach the problem really from a standpoint of why do people do what they do? Or in some cases, why do people not do the things we want them to do in this space? And so in general, that's a very complex question. So I try to perhaps simplify it and say, ultimately people either do what they do or don't do what they don't do because of either they don't have the motivation to do it or they don't have the ability to do it. So in HR lingo, we will call that will and skill. You really need both of those things in place to get, the motivation and change that you're looking for. So I think, if I tackle the will part of it first, I think there's a few things we can do to have a positive influence. First question is, how can we be intentional about this? I think a major reason we don't see the pace of change that we all really would like is that we sort of default into our approach to it. But if you're familiar with the innovation curve, which is essentially, take any major innovation, and let's assume being a great corporate citizen is an innovation of some sort. Take any innovation, there's going to be 2% of the population who's going to jump right on it. Those are your innovators. There's going to be another 13% after that who'll be your early adopters. And then you get into the larger percentages of early majority, late majority, et cetera. So let's say I generally think CRE, as an example, is in one of the first couple of categories. We're there because we decided to be there. So the takeaway, I think, for anybody listening here is the actionable thing you can go do is start this conversation inside your company about who do we want to be when it comes to hiring diverse talent, being an advocate for social change, being a great community partner, having a culture internally of support. Who do we want to be? And from there, leaders take action. So you ask that question, you have an intentional answer. It might not be we want to be the first, it might not be we want the second. You might say we want other employers to be on the vanguard of this, but we want to be in the early majority. Okay, what does that mean? What do we go do? How do we take action? So then you start doing things like benchmarking or asking your coworkers or attending these events to find out what other folks are doing and how you might fit into that. So that's action, that's progress. And again, I think that accelerates a change faster than if you're just sort of defaulting into that position. I also think what we found about being pretty intentional is that it allows you to keep the organization accountable when you're not living up to that intention that you've decided together. So when it comes to DEI, for example, Cree has said, we want to be a leader in this space. And a few months ago, we ran some roadblocks, some hurdles. As things were unfolding, we made some decisions that we looked back on shortly thereafter and said, we wonder how we feel about those decisions. And I was able to go back and say, we have a stated intention to be a leader in this space. I don't think we're living up to that. Can we revisit those decisions? And so we do. So I'll skip briefly then to a little bit more about skill, and then I'll hand it over to my other panelists. The best example I can think about creating skill in the organization is if we all think back to where we were in the wake of George Floyd's murder, and all our companies I know were saying, we definitely have the will, we want to do something, we're not sure what to do. Of course, the temptation is, and let's write a bunch of checks. But thankfully, we took a deep breath and said, let's talk to our employees and ask them what they would like. They're our most important constituency here. What would they care about? And then we listened to them and we went and did what they told us. And so I think, we might overcomplicate the skill part of this and thinking, is there a perfect thing to do? Is there a right thing to do? No, it's really just maybe talk to the constituencies that you care about and listen to them and then take action that's responsive to that. So there's some initial upfront thoughts. I look forward to hearing others and answering everybody's questions.
Thank you, Margaret.
Anyone else want to go first, or I'm happy to jump in? Well, thank you all for allowing me the opportunity and the platform to be here. Again, I'm Jeronica Goodwin. I'm the Senior Vice President and Chief People Officer at Wake Med Health and Hospitals. And in relation to the topic that we're discussing today, I'll start off by just saying that Wake Med has recently, just this past week, been recognized for the 2021 Award in Diversity by the Triangle Business Journal. And I say that up front because I think that is very important to the conversation that we're speaking about today, in reference to how do we recognize women both at work and at home, and how do we, and most importantly, set a place and provide that support that they need to be successful. Our organization is unique in that we are 80% female. So we have several thousand sheroes that walk our halls every single day. And that is not uncommon in healthcare to have the majority of your population be female or women. And so when we think about the subject and the topic today on how we provide that support in that space, it comes somewhat naturally for us, but we can't take that for granted. We have to really be intentional, as Margaret said, to give our leaders and our female providers the support that they need. We also know and recognize that most of them, while they may not be your traditional breadwinner of the household, they do provide a lot of that support outside of work. They are still the homemakers. They may be the primary person responsible for the kids getting to and from school. They may be the primary person that is responsible for monitoring homework and the like. And so when you work in an organization, in an industry that provides 24/7, 365 care, how do you become flexible and nimble to provide that support mechanism that our sheroes would need to be successful? Because they got into healthcare for a reason, And so when they enter our halls and take care of our families and their friends, they're exhausted, they're burnt out, they need a space for resiliency. And so we have to be intentional, even though it may come a little bit natural for us. Unlike other industries, we have to be even more intentional about setting up support systems at work so that when they go home, they can thrive. And so I'm looking forward to sharing more information about what we do at WakeMed and some tangible examples that will hopefully help you to put in place at your workplace that really does help our sheroes to be successful, not only at work, but also when they arrive at home and they have to be a full person to other individuals as well. So again, thank you for this platform, and I look forward to the conversation today.
Thank you, Dr. Goodwin. And you're up next, Courtney.
Thank you. I mean, I think Dr. Goodwin noticed that I was quite intentionally in hopes that she would go next. And I would say because in part, this is a conversation over lunch, and I'm having a different meal today than I would normally have, and listening to both, Margaret and Jeronica talk through, the experiences thus far in their organizations. And I can only hope that those who are listening, today too, are enjoying their lunch, both in the literal sense and the sense of, this discussion thus far, but also will participate, with us and be a part of the conversation, because as stated earlier, I really do think it's the collective intelligence of us that makes us stronger as we move forward. And so maybe to be a bit brief in my comments, what I can say is that I too am absolutely thrilled to be here today, to join in on the dialogue, to listen, to learn, but then also, as stated, to express. And what's not lost on me is that I heard the word intentional used from Margaret, from Jeronica, and I'm going to use it too, because I do think for all the things in our lives that have a certain significance, we do realize that it often takes a plan. And usually we say it takes a plan for that reason of intentionality, because we do want to have something to hold ourselves accountable to. It doesn't mean it can't pivot. It doesn't mean it can't shift. Agility is the name of the game. And oh my gosh, I mean, you think about the fact that there's always been a change dynamic going on in the world. But when we think about the last 18 months, I mean, let me just say personally, I'm tired. I am exhausted. I know that, so many others are as well. But what we know with this idea of being tired or exhausted, or many of us will use the word fatigue, is that change is inevitable. As a matter of fact, we need change, and it has to get beyond the point of just tolerating it to a place where we learn how to embrace it. And so with that, we often talk about as individuals how we need to manage our EQ or emotional quotient. And then we talk about how we need to manage our IQ or intellectual quotient. But there is a third part of that that I think also deserves a seat at the table. And that's the CQ, which is the change quotient. Because as individuals, it teaches us how we lead through these moments. Who are you in the midst of change? And so with that, I believe that, that has to, help us learn whether we, default to managing with our hearts, with our heads, or with our hands, knowing that quite honestly, it's not one style that will get us through. It's a combination of all the styles that will get us through. And then, last but not least, as we talk about this idea of the workplace, I do believe, I'm not even sure, quite honestly, how to define the workplace, because I don't think there's a traditional sense anymore. We always had individuals who probably worked virtually, or occasionally had a day from home, or, worked in the field, or in manufacturing facilities, or it all depends on the nature of the industry that you're in. But what we recognize is what was just being discussed, is that no matter where you worked, there was an opportunity often to determine how you cut off your day. And it felt like you could, say, Now it's family time. Now it's time for friends. Now it's time, and that we started to blur the lines into some, awkward ambiguity that has it all blending together. And so, sometimes people aren't even sure if they're at work or if they're at home because of the topics. And so we have to also think back to this idea of intentionality and how we seek to take control back over our lives, knowing that it may never be what it was. So now we have to be very definitive and intentional about what it will be. With that, Chauncey, I say thank you again and turn it back to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And, I'm super excited to dive into these questions, but you mentioned the word pivot, right? COVID has introduced so many different terms and things into our everyday lingo and language. And, a concept that we've heard a lot, right? Especially recently as the world seemed as if it was starting to open up, but it's kind of taken a few steps back with this Delta variant. But, this post-pandemic normalcy is a term that's been used quite a lot in recent months. How has your organization handled this new transition, and what can our leaders in the audience do to navigate this time as well?
I don't know if you have a particular order you want to go in, but we'll stick with for now with the order that we just spoke in, I guess.
Perfect.
One of the things we're trying really hard to do is to leverage all of the upsides of this and minimize the downsides for people. We're all very clear on the downsides of what we're dealing with, but we are attempting to take a lot of what we see as threat and turn it into opportunity. For example, we talked about, Courtney just talked about how you never feel like you get a day off, or time, when the day is over. And, so that means people feel free to send you an email at 8:30 or 9 o'clock at night, and you feel like, you've got to deal with, do I have to respond, and that sort of thing. But what we also need to, if you're gonna ask that of your employees, we also are saying, then you need also to be okay with the mom who says, from 4 to 5:30, my kids are getting up from their nap, we're setting up for the evening, and that is a time that I'm going to call special and sacred, and I don't take meetings between 4 and 5:30, and we need to make that okay. And so, giving people a lot more flexibility, I think, is not just something employers now do out of the goodness of their heart. I would, for those of you who work in organizations who you feel like you're kind of pushing this rock uphill quite a bit, I would encourage you to start talking about more the business case of this, because I am convinced that employees are getting used to the idea that they're going to have this flexibility. Employees are expecting more flexibility in terms of where and when they work. And I think that's a wonderful thing. And I think we should embrace it. And I think, in a few months, the conversation, when we do start kind of getting back to what the new normal will be, you'll see more employees leave those employers who are not going to give them flexibility that they think they have earned through their demonstration of their ability to do their jobs remotely for people for whom their job can be done remotely, recognizing there's a lot of jobs that can't. Half of our jobs can't. But it will seem arbitrary to employees, and it will seem like you're trying to control them unnecessarily if you don't offer more flexibility, because they've just proven to you for 2 years that they could get their jobs done at home. So I'll just say that I think the movement of more power in the hands of the employees to choose how they want to work, where they want to work, and that extending to which employers they want to work for is I think we should see it as a positive development. And it's going to, I think, require employers to step up in a way that they really haven't been asked to historically. And I think I'm for it.
Yeah, one of the things that we've done to use COVID as a learning experience, and some may find that this is very unique in healthcare, and I agree with that, even though I've been in healthcare for about 26 years, we have really utilized innovation and creativity like never before. And some tangible examples to that from a systemic standpoint. I'm sure all of you are aware that we had the drive-through COVID process. Before PNC started that, WakeMed stood up a drive-through COVID testing. And that's an example of how we identified a problem that we all had, which was COVID. We looked at our resources and we took a step back and said, what is the most practical? We have to reach 1,000 or more people. How do we do it with the staff that we have? And that idea didn't come from leadership. It came from staff members. It came from those at the front line that thought very simply, how do you move and drive volume very easily and seamlessly? And someone said a bank drive-through. Bank drive-through? Why not? And so it was allowing staff the space to be innovative and creative, and the safety of letting them know that no idea was a crazy idea, and that quite frankly, some of those crazy ideas worked. I think creativity has helped us to create a new normal. It has helped us reshape what we think about as our workspace. In fact, we're even looking at, do we need as much office space as we have? How can we reestablish and reuse real estate? Because now we're finding that you don't have to be in an office to be effective. In fact, my recruiters have shown me that they are just as productive at home or working a hybrid schedule as they are in an office setting most of the time. And so I think as leaders, potential leaders, COVID allows us the opportunity to step back, step out of our comfort zone. And I think as an employer, for those of you that manage and represent your companies, it is important that you allow that safety. Employees thrive when they feel as if they can come up with an idea and it's not shut down, even if the idea isn't utilized, but you empower them to think out of the box, to think practically, to do best practice research, to call their colleagues and ask them, what are you doing? It looks like it works. That's when your employee thrives, is when they have the ability and the support from their employer to be innovative, to be creative, and quite frankly, to just look around at the day-to-day lives and things that they do for themselves. How can they implement that at work and make that practical at work? And so I think as we think about diversity, regardless of the gender and the gender roles, as we think about our workforce and the demographics of our workforce, because most of them are comprised of millennials to traditionalists, we have an awesome opportunity to utilize the diversity and the repository of knowledge that you have in one location, your organization, and utilize that in order to make your processes more efficient, more creative, more innovative, more out of the box, and just empowering staff and giving them the space in order to be a part and engaged in that process. COVID is already isolating. It's no worse experience than to also come to an employer and feel isolated. So the more that we can shore up that engagement for our staff and they can feel a part of the solution, then that's what I think where the intent is, and that's what we should all thrive to do.
Maybe sticking along what I believe is becoming thematic across us all. You know, if I go back to this idea of CQ for a moment and the change quotient, what I would say is that this idea of post-pandemic normalcy, you know, really comes down to effective change management to me in a number of ways, things that we would utilize and maybe in a different way in some cases, but that get us through any type of change. And so the first, as you know, my colleagues were just stating, would be two-way communication. So communication is key. And it's not just the hierarchy of leadership down. It's got to be from people at all levels. I mean, think about what, you know, Dr. Goodwin just stated, this idea of where some of the best ideas came from were asking the people who are probably doing it day to day. And so, you know, oftentimes, you know, leadership teams, you know, will sit in a room and try to, you know, figure the world out and how to solve for it, instead of, you know, bringing the people in who are in the world who could probably tell you. And so two-way communication is very, very important as a part of this. And so this is an example of, maybe in what I talk about here is what my organization has tried to do, done, and also what I think could be helpful for any leaders who are navigating this. The next is going to be role modeling what you ask for. Because people may listen to your philosophy, but they are looking for visible demonstration that you believe the philosophy that you are espousing to them as well. For example, we will, let's not tell everybody it's okay to work remote and then we're in the office every day. Because what people inherently start to believe is it really okay to be at home if I see you in the office every day? Or, are you just saying that because it feels good? And people just want to know that it works. And so when I think about my own self, I too have to manage this way. So right now I work from home a couple of days a week, because I'm saying to my team even that they can work from home a couple of days a week. And I notice that they'll ask me, so how many days this week are you going to be in? Because they're testing in their own way. And so to me, role modeling has to be it. Or, this idea of vacation, as we talked about, I will say to my own team, hey, listen, team, you need to take a vacation, but here's some watch outs, because I noticed it, because I used to do it and I've even had them call me out on it too. And that is, go on vacation, but you put your mobile number in your out of office number. No, we can't do that. Establish a backup. It's going to be a week or whatever it's going to be. Somebody there on your team should be able to support. If you don't have that somebody, that's a goal. Find that somebody that you can do the same thing for. Next would be during this time frame too, what new skills are needed to support? Because some people try to take exactly the way they were working in the office and work the same way virtually. Sometimes that works, sometimes it does not. We can't have the same number of meetings perhaps, or we can't, manage the same way. Maybe we do need to look at times that, people need more flexibility in the morning because they're going to work later at night, as, was stated earlier. Allow people to have control over what they can do, but make sure that they're still resourced and that they're given the opportunity to develop the skills that are needed, whether those are digital skills, whether it's ways of working, because a lot of people are having experiences for this prolonged time frame for the first time. And last but not least, I will say this: adjust, adjust, adjust. Be empathetic, be flexible, and be agile. We don't know everything today. And so we need to be open to the fact and make sure that the teams know as well that we may have to adjust as we figure this thing out. But one thing is for sure, we should be figuring it out together.
Awesome. And thank you so much for those points. Lots of really, really good nuggets of wisdom there. And I'm excited to dive into this next question with you all. I know when I was speaking with you all about this event before, in your own ways, everyone brought up, concerns regarding this next topic. And it's that female workers often experience a disproportionate workload, right? You're expected to be everything at home. You're expected to be everything at work. Jackie and I and everyone was talking before, I'm a mom of 3 under 3, so I know exactly what that looks like. But these dual responsibilities have statistically been shown to increase stress, compromise physical and emotional health, and lead to burnout and lower work productivity. What ways can our audience combat these issues in the workplace and at home?
I think I will defer to my fellow panelists to start. I don't want us to get into a 1, 2, 3 where I always have to go first. That's a lot of pressure. They'll have better answers on this, I'm sure.
Well, I mean, the one thing that's very important for me, and I think somebody said it best, you have to create a boundary. Nothing is going to blow up and catch on fire if you're not there. And guess what? If it does, somebody will be there to help the situation. I think a lot of people create undue stress, trauma, and anxiety with the need to always be available and be in control. And I learned that very early in my career, when I was working 14 and 15 and 16 hours a day. And what that did for me is it made me, of course, move up the ladder quickly, but I was exhausted. By the time I got to the position I wanted years ago, I was just exhausted. And I had to take some time off to decompress and reset. And you enjoy the journey much better if you enjoy the journey. a part of living life to the fullest is not the length of life, it's the width of life. And that relates to work as well, is to enjoy it. And to always be in a panic and have anxiety that if you are not there, that something is going to happen. That is not true. If you put the right plans in place, the right systems in place, you hire the right people, you should be able to take off, leave work for 2 weeks, and everything be okay. And a customary check-in every now and again should be all that you need. But I think that a part of being successful, however you define it, especially as women, we always compare ourselves to what that male figure of success looks like. And we don't consider all of the roles and responsibilities that we have and that we're responsible for. But I would say give yourself grace. Give yourself the opportunity to be and maximize for 10 hours. But once you leave the parking lot, create a boundary. If you're like me and you are available 24/7, even I create a boundary. Because I know even if you call me at 2 a.m, I'm not going to be as effective as I could be if I don't get my rest, my relaxation, and I don't have the time that's valuable for my family. And I also think just personally that how you behave outside of work makes you the most powerful and successful leader at work. So if I am my full, authentic, peaceful, happy self outside of work, as a leader, that is what my subordinates and my colleagues see. And I think that we have to take control, we have to manage our time, and we have to articulate to people the expectations. And I think when you do that, the journey becomes phenomenal, both at work and at home. So that would be my advice to all of the sheroes and the heroes on the phone.
This is I can't agree enough, and I'm listening as much because again I think this is helpful, and you know, as that was being stated, it reminded me of something a good friend of mine you know once stated, and it's not, I'm not going to set myself on fire to keep you warm. And so we have to remember that, you know, people will always create emergencies and other things, but that does not necessarily have to be a way of life. And with that, we have to practice exactly what was stated. So I fully agree. And so the only build I would offer is don't accept it, stand up to it. Share your experience and the impact that it's having. Oftentimes, you know, many of us, and I see this a lot in, you know, whether, quite honestly, my female colleagues or others, we just accept things. Right? We just accept it because we feel like it is what it is. I'm just going to do it. I'm not going to complain about it because either someone has told us that is the way to win, or someone has, or we feel like we don't want to be the one, right? We don't want to be the one that's, you know, pushing against the grain. So my response is be the one. Be the one to push against the grain. If the grain is saying accept everything that somebody will put on you as a weight, then you be the one to say, I'm not going to do that. And so, and why you share the impact and the experience is because, quite honestly, sometimes people are doing it because they don't understand what they're creating that creates a challenge or a hardship in our lives. And so we have to, you know, seek to identify, you know, how to make it better. You know, someone once also shared, and I adopted this and adapted it as well because it really caused me to think, and I just will share this with everyone as well, and that is perception is only reality if we act on the perception. And so that means we need to change our perceptions or even, you know, the stereotypes or the things that people, you know, do and or say against us sometimes in order to affect the new reality that we want to see. Sometimes in the office doing all the work. So stop staying in the office doing all the work, draw your boundary and say that my day stops at 5 or my day stops at 6. Why? Because you have a life outside of work that you also need to give credit to, that you need to honor. what I found myself, even at one point in time when I was also working the 14, 16-hour days, is that I was short with my family, and they don't deserve that. I would give so much to everybody else that I wouldn't have enough for them. I didn't want to talk. I was just kind of like, please, somebody make a decision, because I don't want to make another decision today. I don't care what we have for dinner. Somebody just, I'm allergic to seafood, so, choose chicken, do something, but don't ask me anything else. And again, they didn't deserve that. And so, as what was being said, we have to keep the balance. We have to push against the grain, define our space, and recognize we do it not because we just want to be different. We do it because we deserve it. And when we identify the respect that we feel like we deserve for a reason, quite honestly, I believe that respect will be mirrored in our workplaces and in our personal lives as well. Thanks.
And all little teeny thing I would have to add to any of that, I'm just, yes, is we're talking about it from a perspective of do this for yourself, because it's very important to do for yourself. We want you to do this for yourself. But as leaders in your organizations, we sometimes forget how many people are watching us. And so you do it because you can be the first, but then that has a powerful impact in letting others know throughout the entire organization that this is okay. This is not just okay, it's not tolerated, it's normal, it's what would be expected to do. And it takes on a lot of momentum, which is good for everybody, not just women. Obviously we're focused on that, but it's good that authenticity, that, boundary setting, that here's what I need to be my best self at work and at home. That's a good example to set for anybody.
Mm-hmm. And it's an art and a science. I would just lastly say it takes a lot of practice. It took me years to really be at peace with, I don't have to leave work at midnight, because I've done that before many, many years. I don't have to do that. I know what I know that I know that I know that I know that I know. And I know how to study for the things that I don't know. I know how to close that gap. And so if I know all of that and I have an incredible team behind me, then what am I doing it for? What void am I trying to fill? And who am I trying to compare myself to? And I think when you step away from that and you become at peace with your leadership style, with who you are, with how you identify yourself and how you show up, then your confidence it's an inner confidence that's more from a place of peace and not cockiness, but it's an inner confidence to say, I know everything will be okay. I'm going to treat my staff well. They're going to work hard, and I'm going to work hard for them. And we all can have a full life if we do it that way. We don't have to short anybody. And so when you get to that place through a lot of work, reflection, and practice, you will find yourself being the best leader that you've ever been when you reach that point in your career. At least that's been my personal experience.
Work is so good sometimes that we need to honor it like we do a good meal. Save some for tomorrow, okay? Leftovers are fine at times.
I love that.
I love that. I
That's
love
awesome.
it.
Courtney, we got to get all of your sayings and your ziggers.
Courtneyisms.
They're great, and just post them on the wall because they're very much on point.
Yes, I agree. One of the things that I was excited about when I asked you all to speak at this event was that you all work in very different industries, right? Dr. Goodwin, you mentioned that you work with predominantly female staff, and that is pretty much general across the board for folks in the healthcare industry. Margaret, working with Will Speak Create, I spoke with you and Courtney, and I imagine that your industries are predominantly male. But how do we empower our female leaders who are within our organizations, for folks like Dr. Goodwin who work in a predominantly female organization, or for you all who maybe a little bit more, those numbers may be different. How do we empower our female leaders to have difficult conversations and empower them to bring up some of these things and these nuggets of wisdom that we're talking about today?
That's a great question. I'll just start it off and kick it to my wonderful panel colleagues here. But I think the best thing to do to your question, Chauncey, is to provide safety. The reason why I'm in my position is because 26 years ago, WakeMed provided safety. They provided safety through an internship that focused on minorities and females in healthcare leadership roles, because at that time, less than 1% of healthcare comprised of women and people of color. And so when your organization sticks themselves out there to provide that safety, then you're able to have difficult conversations and you're able to have courageous conversations. And so I think the answer to that for me is, again, I'll go back to what I said before, providing safety. There's literature around the difference between women leadership and men leadership. And there's opinions on both sides. But one thing is for sure, if you provide a woman, and this is literature, this is evidence-based, if you provide females the safety to be just as courageous, to make tough decisions, to have just as much power and influence as their male counterparts, then some would argue that organizations are much better ran by female leaders. Again, that's not my opinion. That is evidence-based research, and there's arguments on both sides. Whether you agree with that or not, I think if you provide that type of environment, anyone can have a courageous conversation and be able to do that with respect and have people to hold them in highest regards. But it has to be created by that organization in that environment.
Maybe to just build along that for a moment, I agree with you, Dr. Goodwin, whether you agree with that or not. But I tell you, you're right. There's a lot of evidence, because the first female-run organization I grew up in was called Home. Okay, and I had a very strong mother. I had 3 brothers, and of course my father. But everybody was clear on who the CEO and president of that organization was. And so there's quite a bit to support. And it goes to, the approach and everything as well. And I agree with what you mentioned around this idea of, safe identity workspaces for women to really support in the organization. And the only couple of builds I would offer would be, it's always appropriate for it to happen from my perspective. And I also think this is evident in the research that it happens in both all women settings and in mixed gender settings, because it's about, making sure that, there's a space to compare notes, to, also feel that it's okay to be vulnerable, to take risks, but at the same time also learn, what the other gender is thinking and also talking about, so that it's both rather than one or the other. The other thing that I think, continues to support this is that both men and women do need to, fight against, understand, and acknowledge that second generation gender bias does exist in our workplaces. And this goes quite a bit to the work that we do around equity, where we know that at one point in time, when there was a smaller percent of women in the workforce or in industries, et cetera, that's when a lot of these career paths were designed. For example, to be the CEO or to be the president, you needed to take a rotation through sales or marketing or operations, et cetera. And to do that, you needed to pick up the family and move here and move there. And it was male dominated when that was done. But many of our organizations have not progressed beyond that construct. And so we need to fight. Is it really that it needs to happen that way? Or should we change the career path and expectation to truly be about focusing on the capabilities and competencies that are necessary, which can be achieved in a number of different ways. And then last but not least, I do think that we need to make sure that women's development is anchored in leadership purpose rather than the perception of women, which is also a dynamic that I believe we're still fighting in many organizations today. Because I still know that a lot of my colleagues spend a lot of time and energy trying to find an image that's acceptable to men. an image that will allow them to compete on what they feel is equal ground, and while at sometimes even having to downplay the femininity that they have because there's a trade-off there, right? This trade-off notion of being, liked for being respected, which can ultimately also create a bit of a challenge against identity. And this shouldn't have to be the case, because what we talk about is having workspaces where people can bring their best selves to work, where they can, thrive, where they can be honored for who they are, not having to suppress parts of their identity that are fully owned and should be acknowledged in order to, acquiesce. And so the focus has to be placed on the purpose and the ways to advance and the values that the person stands for in their role. This has got to be, becomes more and more important. That's what we spend our time talking about, right? What values do you have? How do you lead? How do you manage? Rather than, is it okay to wear a dress today? Or do I need to, or should I wear pants and these other things that take up too much time, energy, and space and should not need to be a focus for women at all? Thank you.
And I have very little to add to that. I just will put a particular plug in for, I would imagine that my colleagues here would agree that having the courage individually and the skills to have a difficult conversation, to advocate for yourself, to advocate for someone else, that's a years long journey trying to get skilled at that. But a very particular thing that was incredibly helpful to me is, I don't know if you're familiar with Crucial Conversations books or courses or whatever, but that to me was just sort of like, there's literally a formula in there for, okay, sit down and sort of chart out how you want to have a tough conversation that maximizes your chance for success, minimizes the chance that the other person will be defensive. And also, because you spend some time getting your own motives in order, you also walk into with a great deal more confidence, because I've learned after that work that your motives are kind of half the battle. If you know that you're there and you're raising this issue because you care about the success of the team, or you care about the success of the broader organization, or you're advocating for someone else that deserves to be advocated for, including yourself, those are all very reasonable motives, and you have every right to be heard and every right to have your viewpoint win the day. So that's just a really super practical thing that was a big difference maker for me, a step function in how I was able to get a little bit better at that.
I would also just add, in terms of a crucial conversation, because all crucial conversations don't have to be bad, but I would particularly say my advice to women leaders, and using myself as an example and to show some transparency. Make sure that quantitatively you know numbers of your business. If you look at the comparison of women leaders versus male leaders, one of the things that some of the literature will say is that women are fluffy and, oh, we're so cute, but we're not business minded. And so regardless, again, of your gender identification and how you lead, it's just good business to know the numbers of your business. Whenever you can have a crucial conversation, especially at the C-suite level, and be invited to the table, and not just invited, but you're able to be engaged, is your business of your industry. You know your numbers, general statistics, and then you can talk through and speak to the business that you're engaged with. That gets you a different place in the room versus someone who isn't quantitatively astute and may not know their organization. So my advice, and again, I learned that very early in my career, for the women leaders as well as the heroes on the line, is to know quantitatively your business. And that way, when it comes to a crucial conversation, you can back it up. It's not a feeling. It removes biases because the data is the data. And some say numbers don't lie. Well, I argue there is new math, and you can make math look like the way you want to. But in a general sense, when you can come into a place from a quantitative perspective, it removes a lot of biases and barriers that you may experience. And that allows the defensiveness, a part of that crucial conversation that you may have, it removes all of that. So that would just be a personal tip that I've had to learn along the way that I've found very advantageous, especially as a female leader.
Chauncey, if you'll allow one more small build, I would just say this because it came to mind as my colleagues were talking. And because I very much believe in crucial conversations as well. We've done quite a bit of work and investment within BASF on crucial conversations as a way to, ensure that you are operating from fact and that you're able to, have the type of dialogue with colleagues that's necessary. One of the builds that I often will talk about too, though, is just a reminder to everyone that we don't have to wait to have the conversation until it becomes crucial, because there's so many things that we put to the side when it comes up, and we figure, well, maybe I won't talk about it. Maybe I won't talk about it. Yet again, I go back to maybe a little bit earlier in our conversation where, I know there's apprehension sometimes in being the one, but there are times when it makes sense to be the one, to open the conversation early, to talk about it and see if we can, somehow prevent it from getting to a point that creates that additional challenge that comes along. Sometimes when it feels like it could be, considered a crucial conversation, because I believe in what Dr. Goodwin said as well, too. Sometimes people label that as being something bad. A crucial conversation is not ever meant to be bad. It's simply stating where we are and how we move forward. But I also think that should be the goal of any conversation. And so I employ folks to, as leaders, women leaders, male, think about, having, coaching conversations and things of that nature that bring insight forward to individuals. But if you get to a point where a crucial conversation is necessary, then yet again, there's a moment to lean in instead of leaning back. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We just talked about what we can do to empower our female leaders and our female staff, but I know we've got some heroes. Dr. Goodwin, I really like that term, some heroes and sheroes in the audience. What can our male leaders do to support their female staff? And, what are the consequences when we don't? And then also, what can men do to be more supportive at home? I'd love to get you all's take on that as well.
This might be a time where everybody's looking like, now, what are you going to say? Which I accept that, because, quite honestly, I do struggle with this one. I struggle with this question a lot because it concerns me that we even have to ask the question. I know it's legitimate. I know it's necessary, but it does concern me that we have to, ask, what can male leaders do to support, what can men do to be more supportive at home, and what are the consequences, if we do not, because I like to believe, and this is my own optimism speaking, that, it's understood. Right, that your women's issues are my issues are women's issues. Again, going back to the idea that it takes our collective intelligence in order to move things forward and get things done. And so, what can male leaders do? Again, I think this goes back to allyship and what we talk about. First, don't assume you understand. Seek to understand. Ask the questions. One of the most simplest ways that I think people move past, because again, oftentimes it can be thought of as a male trait that, you can just want to have a conversation, but, sometimes males are already solutioning, right? Oh, yeah, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Just pause. And if you don't know how to approach, ask, what can I do to be an advocate, to be a supporter, to be an ambassador? What's getting in the way of this happening now? And stay open to it and realize that, as we talked about earlier, it has to be intentional that we do these things, because quite honestly, we can assume too much and start to go off in the wrong direction. The other thing I would say about this idea of being more supportive at home, if you are in the home with, a spouse, a significant other, et cetera, remember, it sounds like that's your home too. And so that in itself suggests that there is a partnership and a collaboration as to, how the home gets managed in order to ensure that there is equity in the way that things are happen. And so when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's not only about the workplace, it's about life, and it's about in all things. And last but not least, I would go back to what we talked about with the same things of effective change management. Two-way communication, always be in dialogue with the other party. Role model what you want to see from them as well. And then, make sure that we adjust as necessary, knowing that it can happen at any time, and we need to be empathetic, flexible, and agile, because at the end of the day, again, what we all want is to be a lighthouse for each other and with each other, because it takes that type of direction to move forward. Thanks.
Yeah, I just, I'm going to echo a lot of what you just heard, and encourage us to have those conversations at home, just like we're having them at work. State what you need and what, in order to be successful and show up my best self, you advocate. And, but I would also say, there are all kinds of barriers, out there that we're all dealing with all the time, but let's just make sure we're not one of them ourselves. Sometimes, that things have to be done a certain way at home. I could get really frustrated that my husband doesn't put the towels quite in the right way in the linen closet. They're supposed to be folded quite this way, and they're supposed to look this way when it's done. But if I make a big deal out of that, I'm the only person doing laundry. So I have to let that go. And there are some examples like that, all over my home. And I would assume others where, I either want it to be done the way I would do it, or, I'm going to be the only one doing it. So that's a barrier that I would encourage us all to try and let go, and, solution to the other ones like everybody else has given us advice on.
Awesome. This next question is, and I'm excited about this one, and I've got my pen ready right here for you all's responses, but what are some books, some podcasts that you all like to listen to, or that have been really influential for you all in your journey, either something that you just read a week ago or 20 years ago, that you'd like to share with our attendees?
20 years ago, my favorite book was Work, Sister, Work. I can't remember the author, but there are two sisters out of Washington, D.C., and they give you the ABCs of thriving in the workforce. Some wonderful interviews that they've conducted all over the country of the most powerful women, at least at that time, and some key characteristics that they embodied that made them different and set them apart. It's important to be different because you want to be your authentic self, but you also have to fit in. It's an art and a science to that. You can't be so different that it puts you on the outside, but you also want to be yourself so that when you're on the inside, you're comfortable. And that book 20 years ago really provided some guidance with that. My favorite podcast is anything by Joel Osteen. I'm a huge fan. Whether you have the spiritual belief or not, I think he is encouraging and very positive. And in a world of calamity and such chaos, that positivity gets me going in the morning. And then my last book that I read just recently, and it has become one of my recent favorites, is called Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday. And it talks about leaving your ego outside of the room. People see that, they can feel that. If you just be yourself, whoever that is for you, and if you love who that person is, it permeates and people can't help but love you. And you don't have to be egotistical about it. And that book talks about those leaders that are egotistical they don't really go far. There's a plateau that they enter. And the ones that are humble, always able to listen, get advice, get feedback, they go further, and they enjoy the journey along the way. So those are my three.
Margaret, would you like to go? Or?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, probably keeping a similar theme of three. One that is from some time ago then is a book that hopefully others have read, but it's called Quiet: The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking by Susan Cain. This book I think is absolutely wonderful. One of the biggest misconceptions as I try to talk to folks and let them know too is I am an introvert, and they all say, "Oh, I don't believe it," which means again you have to not think about what you visibly see with people. The way we learn people is through relationship with them, and it reminds us about that, right? And that's the power of connectivity. The next book is one that we actually have been talking about within BASF, within my organization. It's called Multipliers: How the Best Leaders Make Everyone Smarter by Liz Wiseman. And so this book has resonated, quite a bit with a number of the people leaders in the organization. We've also managed it on a global level as well. And then the last one I will speak to you goes to a book from someone we had come in a couple of years ago, or maybe even last year. Isn't that funny how that time lapse happens? But anyway, associated with our diversity, equity, and inclusion days that we do annually. And the book is titled The Authenticity Principle: Resist Conformity, Embrace Differences, and Transform How You Live, Work, and Lead by Ritu Basin. And I hope only that I have to pronounce her name regularly. And I apologize, Ritu, if you ever see this and I have somehow still said it incorrectly, because it's not intentional, and you are wonderful. With that, those are my three. Thanks, Chauncey.
Well, I've already plugged Crucial Conversations here, right? So that was a 20-year ago read. A podcast, I'm kind of late to the podcast game. I'm not that hip, and this, I wouldn't really call this business, but I'm so obsessed with it, I'm going to share. Is the Art Curious podcast by Jennifer Dassl, who is actually one of the leading curators at the North Carolina Museum of Art. But it's a national podcast, and she's very popular, and it's wonderful. And I think they're on their 8th or 9th season. I'm still working my way through it, but highly recommend if you have any interest in art whatsoever. This is neither a book nor a podcast, but my team, I do have team members on the call who'll be like, "Oh, she's really going to talk about this again because she's obsessed," is a documentary actually about rock climbing, and it's called The Dawn Wall, DAWN Wall. And we actually have used as an example internal to CRE about effective teamwork when you've got your differences, how they really can make you stronger, and you can accomplish amazing things as a result of working together. So highly recommend. And then finally, the book, that to me, I thought about this a lot when you were talking, Dr. Goodwin, about how much this changed my thinking about work and life in general, is The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And it's just the idea that, you really are, all you really ever have in any given moment is the moment you're in. And we spend so much energy, or the temptation is to spend so much energy worrying about what happened before and what I should have done differently or something better, or what are the repercussions of that, or even more frequently, what is coming, what's to come. Is there dread, there's worry, there's anxiety. And that book alone for me really helped me get to a place where if you just are really focused on what you're doing right now, even if what you're doing right now is planning for the future, you have to do it. You don't have to worry about it. So in terms of managing anxiety and leadership and achievement at work and all of those things, that for me was a real difference maker that I'd love to share with people when I get the chance.
Margaret, I love that. I had someone tell me, depression can be worrying about what happened in the past. Anxiety is worrying about what is going to happen in the future. Both of those things stop you from focusing on the present. And that's the only thing that you have, any real control over. So that's super powerful. And I think that's something that we can all be mindful of. And I wrote all of these down. My reading list just got super long, but I think that's going to be one that I put at the top for sure. And I just want to give you all a chance now for any final remarks before we go into the next portion of our breakout sessions to share anything else. This has been wonderful. Thank you so much for being here.
No, again, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm always humbled when people ask me to be on a panel because I don't think my life is that interesting. I just work a lot and do other things that I enjoy. I guess my last words would be, if COVID hasn't taught us anything, it's that life is really short and it's fleeting. And so with that, I would just implore and ask everyone on this call to give yourself grace, to forgive yourselves. You're not going to be able to do everything and be everything to everybody, and that is certainly okay. And you don't have to apologize for it. Love yourself a little bit more. Be true, be honest, be authentic, be sincere. Put people around you that are loyal, that believe in you, that will champion you, that will challenge you, because that's how you become a better leader and a better person, is the person that puts the mirror up so that you can see yourself. And just have fun. If you're going to work and you're coming home and you're not having a party, then reset. Because really life is just so short, and that's how we should be thinking in those regards. So make sure in all that you do that there's some fun infused in it, and enjoy it as much as you can.
That's super tough to follow, Dr. Goodwin. I guess I'll touch back to the original where we kind of started, which was intentionality. And one thing I don't think we've talked a lot about is intentionality about who you surround yourself with. And that, we've talked about having a great team. That's really important in your work, but that's also really important in your life. Just around, you have all these opportunities to meet new people, and I always enjoy meeting new people, but I also sometimes have to say, I don't get to spend the kind of time I want to with the people I already love. And so, being really intentional about, you only really get to be in my inner circle if there's something that we're giving to each other in terms of support and positivity and moving each other forward. That's important at work, but I think it's also important at home too. So I'll touch back to intentionality about who gets to share your space. And if, and maybe that's also the voice inside your head too. You want that voice to be positive as well. I sometimes will say to someone who's really struggling with a lot of negative talk, and they're really being very down on themselves, not giving themselves the grace that Dr. Goodwin talked about. And I say, okay, let's pretend that voice is a person. Would you want to be friends with them? Or do you deserve better than that? Well, then, let's try to have more positive thoughts in your own head too. So I'll leave those as my parting thoughts.
Similar to other colleagues, thank you all for joining us for this conversation too, and thank you to the Chamber for the invitation. It's been a lot, and I have also learned a lot. And a strong reminder, as I hope that all of those who are participating with us virtually today remember that we all have to be the best at getting better. And being a part of this moment with us certainly is indicative of that for so many, and I feel the same. And so thank you. And the last thing is this, and that is we can always try to identify whom we like or whom we want to be like, because there are so many wonderful people in this world. But the reminder to me is that we are all unique, and that's what diversity, equity, and inclusion is about. In many cases, it's an appreciation of those differences, because at the end of the day, while you may search the world trying to find out who's the best person to be, I think what we all end up finding out in the end, hopefully, is that the best person in this world to be is yourself. So with that, I say thank you.
Thank you again, everyone, for being here.